So, Tim Straub, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
I mean, despite the attire that you have chosen to join us in as a Bears fan, I'm still excited about kind of walking through some topics with you. So, I'll tell you,
And wait,
one of the
wait,
reasons.
just for the listeners that aren't like seeing this, Tim is a Bears fan too, right? No,
No, I
no.
choose to be on the winning side of things.
Oh, okay. And what side's that, Tim?
Yeah, the Packers.
Okay,
I
here we
think
go.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great organization. I can't really complain. We've won a few games this year, though, so that's been nice. But you know what the Bears do? They bring you in with a few wins just to break your heart. So I'm still waiting for the letdown. But Tim, I wanted to have this conversation for a few reasons. One, to catch up with you. We used to build some data centers together back in the day at Whiting Turner, and but you made the switch to the owner side, so there's that angle. But I think everyone's talking about data centers. Everyone's touching data centers in some capacity, and you're kind of at this like an interesting intersection of like a major kind of topic in the industry. So there's a couple different threads to go down, but maybe start with like let's talk through your role as the senior technical program manager at Google. What does that actually mean?
so. The technical program manager title, obviously, it's a pretty large, encompassing title, but specifically, I'm responsible for the construction quality and commissioning program, and so to build and define the requirements that the contractors need to make to meet the owner's requirements, and then providing oversight and similar like construction administration services throughout construction. It also encompasses the qualifying of third-party commissioning firms, sourcing of the third-party commissioning firms, and then oversight and management of those contracts.
So is that your alarm that you have a
Yep.
podcast to record, Lars?
Yeah, that was it. Here I am.
So maybe let's start with the transition from kind of GC to owner. Like, how has that gone? And maybe how has your GC background kind of informed how you approach and manage maybe the GC angle to your job today?
It was a little shaky coming out of the gate. It's a bit of a hard transition, particularly coming from like the superintendent to the owner side, because as a superintendent, you're used to calling the shots, right? Your boots on the ground, you're directing contractors which way to go, and like it's you direct to those contractors, right? Like if you need the electrician to go work on something, you just go tell the foreman what it is you need and when you need it by. Versus, when you switch over to the owner side, you no longer can do that. Like, you're then working through a general contractor and through a superintendent, and so it actually kind of adds a little bit of complexity, right? And particularly when you're on the contractor side, you always presume, well, they're the owner. Like they call the shots, like they get to just do whatever they want. I'll tell you, that's a little bit of a fallacy. Even though you are the owner, it's not the same as like when you were able to just direct trade partners, and contractors. Like really with managing general contractors, it requires, a different approach. It requires that like you lead through influence, and you don't have the ability to just direct. Like you have to rationalize the why behind it, and then you have to have like a justification behind why it is that we need to do something. And so that was a bit of a struggle, but it's been a while now, so kind of worked through that. But as far as now that we've kind of gotten through that hurdle, I think my experience as a general contractor has kind of helped, particularly with like defining and developing the program requirements, because I still have like that execution mindset and like the understanding of it, different challenges, I guess, in the field. You're working with a revolving workforce. You don't necessarily have continuity all the time in which electrical foreman you might have or pipe fitter, something to that extent. And so I do try to leverage field experience when implementing like any sort of program or process as an owner.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
wanna
it's interesting because I think just to maybe pause on that for a second, like you were never a command and control superintendent, and you were kind of naturally collaborative. And I think what I remember from our time working together was in the chaos of data center delivery, which is, everything is late seemingly, and speed is of the essence. Like good information is really hard to come by. And so I remember maybe part of what I was attracted to you at that time was you were always able to provide really good information. And if you didn't have it, you worked to get it, and you were like, you calmed the chaos. And so to hearing that even someone like yourself, it took a transition to that owner side, it is interesting because you're right. We naturally think owner has the kind of levers of power, but there's still a dynamic there where you're having to set context, set expectations, and potentially, like you said, lean in more into those early expectations around programming requirements to lay the foundation of that delivery execution mindset, right?
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And I mean, I think actually like the field experience from the contractor side kind of helped, right?
Yeah.
Because if you look at a lot of like your stronger superintendents or project managers from the contractor side, they're the ones that don't have that one size fits all leadership style. That like the command and control that you referenced, right? Like they're the ones that are able to recognize how to adapt as a leader based on who it is that you're working with. I mean, it's no secret that the approach to managing an electrician is different than that of an iron worker, right? Like iron workers have a different culture, they have a different mindset, they've got their own worldly lens, like, versus electricians, completely different, right? And so like you do have to adjust and tailor like your leadership style based on the audience. But, like switching over to the owner, that was new territory, right? Because GCs are the same way. They're different than an electrician or an iron worker. And so like I had to learn that, you know.
Mm.
And I think one thing too that you recognize is inherently every GC feels that they're the best. And like I worked for a GC and, we took great pride in our work and we always felt that, our way was leading the way. And so switching over to an owner where now you're starting to work with general contractors that you didn't personally work for before and learning those organizations' culture, yeah, it's different. Like you really do have to be more respectful of varying means and methods, right? And you really have to get comfortable with accepting other ways of achieving the same result.
I think from a leadership standpoint, and I appreciate everything you said. I do want to go back in to your influence comment, right? But I've seen so many leaders, there's a start and a finish line. But there's a lot of times where along the way, along that journey, that's where trust is built or trust is lost, both up the chain of command and down the chain of command, rather than measure the result. And some companies within this sprint may achieve start to finish a lot quicker than others, right? But we should be measuring the result, the finish line. Did it achieve the objectives we achieved? And then how much pain was in between? For me to like constantly manipulate and like, no, this is the way it has to be to get from step A to step B to step C to step in that journey. That's where I think both from an organizational standpoint and then from a leader to say a superintendent or foreman or, apprentice, whatever it is, that's where you have to let organizations arrive at their own conclusions rather than, dare I say, don't like this term, but the micromanaging, because it measure the result. And some people are going to get there more efficiently than others. Some organizations will get there more efficiently than others, but let some people go in loops to ultimately get to that end point. It's interesting. I do want to go back to influence, Tim. So when you talk about influence and leadership styles and And I'd love to get like super granular here because I love what you said. It's like, well, I can just go tell the electrician what to do. Like, hey, you need to go do this, right? Versus now. So when you talk about like influence and, the Whiting Turner way versus, wait, I'm sort of working with other contractors and they're sort of achieving the objective, right? Like they're winning too. Wow. There's actually a lot of good winning companies out there. Different, but they're winning. What is your approach around influence and what have you learned? How has it changed from going and just telling the electrician what to do and how to do it and when you need it done by versus what's your approach now?
I think the approach now is, really, you kind of have to help others develop like a solution on their own, right? So rather than providing the solution, a lot of times you're maybe asking like leading questions to get people to like recognize what it is that you're seeing, right?
So
Like,
say hypothetically I needed to cut the schedule by 6 months and I needed you to come. I feel like you're right. That was maybe the scenario that I feel like we walked into, but sorry, I derailed you. Keep going.
no, you're good. And so, as the general contractor, a lot of times you're providing the solution, right? And like you're compressing the schedule, so you'll recognize that maybe we need to uh, do 2 shifts, right? We're going to do wire pulling at night. We'll do the wire terminations during the day, right? And so you kind of create that solution, and then you work with the electrician to implement it. Whereas on the owner's side, you might recognize that as a solution to compressing the schedule, but rather than presenting and implementing it, you're kind of asking the general contractor, like, well, what, what opportunities do you see that we could do to compress the schedule, right? Like, is there maybe something we could do with 2 different shifts? And so, like, you're really kind of, you're asking those leading questions to get them to recognize what it is that you're seeing rather than just telling them what it is that you're seeing.
Yeah, I can see that. Is there something about I guess even like the category of quality that your perspective has changed from the GC side to the owner? Maybe like a bit more. You're looking at the life cycle of the asset rather than just the initial build.
Yes, you're spot on that one. It's changed quite a bit
Mm.
because, as a general contractor, they take great pride in their work. They want to deliver a solid project, right? Whereas, particularly as an owner working in data centers, I had to change my mindset to now all of a sudden you're taking into account reliability of the equipment, and you're also taking a look at the redundancy within the design, right?
Mm.
And then you're also pulling like historical data for like failure analysis on a certain thing. And so you're really taking more of like a risk-based decision to quality, where it's like, what level or standard of quality is necessary that would still deliver on the required SLO. It still delivers on the reliability targets, right? But it doesn't introduce risk to the operations of the facility. And so it's a completely different mindset when you're looking at defining the quality standards, right? Um, and as a contractor, you're typically just building to whatever requirements are provided, whether it's an industry standard, it's a spec from the owner. But when you start being the person that's defining those requirements, it's a completely different world.
Mm.
Like you're not gonna like, electrical acceptance testing is a good example. Like you're not gonna just say, hey, go out and do all the needed tests for air insulated switchgear. No. Like as an owner, you're looking at it, you're looking at where have you had failures in the past? What are the failure rates of the different components within the equipment? What sort of redundancy has the engineering team put into it, right? Like, is this at N? And if this piece of switchgear goes down, it will subsequently have an immediate outage impacting operations. Or is there some sort of redundancy where there's going to be a transfer scheme And it's like, well, we can take a little bit of risk here in this switch gear because if it were to go down, it's not going to impact operations, right? And so, like, now all of a sudden you're going line by line through that META standard, and you're like, okay,
Yep.
this test, and then like, maybe it'll say like test the CTs, and like now you start thinking, you're like, well, it costs X amount of money per CT. It takes an hour per CT to do the test. You're like, how many failures have we actually had with CTs, right?
Mm.
Are we going to spend more money preventing a failure than it is to just go into that break fix mentality and just drive that thing till it falls apart and just deal with it at that point?
Super, super interesting. As a general contractor, we typically get sort of handed, a performance spec. It's like, go build it this, right? And arguably do it to the lowest budget possible, right?
Mhm.
Um, or we're handed complete plans and specs. Hey, just go build it, right? Our job is not to ask those questions, right? It's fascinating listening to this like new world, right? This new viewpoint that you're sort of experiencing, and how much of that are you interacting with your designers? How much of that are you interacting with your general contractors? And you think from a build perspective, outside of the owner, can general contractors or builders take more of an approach around that? And like, how even could they start? Because it's big. And sometimes we don't have access to the data, right?
No, yeah, you're spot on. It does, it takes a village
Yeah.
because, yes, you do have to work quite heavily with the engineering team because you're looking at how did they design their system and the redundancy that they have in it. But then you also need the contractor's perspective for what are the cost and schedule implications. So whatever change or process you want to implement. And so like from my role, you're the one that's herding all those cats together and you're trying to drive to a solution. It's not always the easiest, but I appreciate it. It's a good challenge.
It's interesting because, Stephen mentioned sort of building some of my own stuff. It's fascinating listening to some of the designers or the engineers. It's like, well, what do you want? It's like, huh? No, you're the expert. I've hired you as the expert. Can you tell me what's best here and the reasons why and the justification and why this, you know, lower life cycle cost or lower maintenance, all these reasons, why and how that is it outside of like a BOD? Is it it's sort of like this whole viewpoint that you're talking about? And I kind of feel that it is. It's like, no. There's a justification as to why, not just meeting a requirement, but like a more just like boots on ground, like nuts and bolts. Like this is why we're doing some of this stuff because this makes sense. It's interesting. You're bringing a builder's perspective at the owner level that a lot of times I think can be missed because sometimes people don't leave the office when they're drawing stuff up and think, oh, this can be built. Here you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good segue to talk about kind of how AI has impacted
Yeah.
maybe the building process. And not just from like a tooling standpoint, but like the type of data centers required to drive, AI compute versus, back when we were building in Iowa, it was mainly cloud compute that I think we were building for. And so I haven't built a data center in 10 years. What does a data center build look like right now in this like race that we're all in compared to
It's
what we
shit.
were building
Oh,
back in the day?
that's actually one that I don't think a lot of people recognize how much it has changed. So
Hmm.
like on the projects that like I used to work on, Steven, like those were enterprise projects, right? They were data center clients building for themselves. And in that period in time, a lot of times the culture or the mindset was, well, we want to be the best. We want to be the platinum product. We want the best reliability. We want the lowest downtime. We want to be perfect, right? And budgets are always present. However, the budgets were maybe had more room to facilitate a lot of that. And then the industry kind of pivoted more towards cloud, right? Now all of a sudden you're building for external customers. You have a sales team that has sold capacity. There's financial implications. if the building's not delivered on that schedule, right? And they've also made commitments regarding like the uptime, right? And so you started to see maybe more decisions based on cost and schedule in the cloud computing time period. Budgets were still maybe not as scrutinized to the same level because obviously there were significant financial implications if you have an outage, right? So you kind of do that risk reward calculation and you're like, well, it's cheaper to do all that testing now versus
Yeah.
if we had an outage. Oof. Now you fast forward to today where the primary client of most of these data centers is some sort of ML service, right? And what we're learning real time is that obviously time to market is the differentiating factor in any of these ML facilities, right? It's the time to market that is the driving force because the lost revenue of not turning up the building exceeds that of shooting for maybe a higher quality product, right? And so I think the risk tolerance overall on the owner side has greatly increased given, the holistic outlook at cost of operation, right? And so you're seeing, like, particularly as it relates to quality and commissioning, there's a higher risk tolerance. So inherently you can dial back on the testing requirements. But there's still like this balancing act that like I think the industry's still trying to figure out, right? Like what is the acceptable level of risk? Like once this building goes live into operations, what is the uptime requirements? Are we still at that traditional 5-9 mindset? In most instances, you're gonna find you're not. You're at a significantly lower SLO that's required for the building, right? And so I think a lot's still being figured out as we go, because this whole ML push, it's new to everyone. We know that we're not operating in that 5-9 mindset anymore, but what is the appropriate level of uptime?
What do you mean by 5-9? What does that represent?
So that would reference like the uptime for it, right?
Oh, I see.
And so
Yeah, I gotcha.
yeah, that translates to 99.99% uptime, right? But in ML and AI services, a lot of times that's not needed, right? Because you can do ML training in more locations, right? And ML training, if ML training was to be paused because equipment had to be taken down for maintenance or whatever reason, it doesn't directly impact you and I, right? You're not going to go to a website and get an error message that it's not available because like ML training, it's something that's quietly happening on the back end.
I'll watch you.
And so like you don't have a direct recognizable impact to a user. However, you still have lost revenue. Like if those ML models aren't training and aren't learning in the background, there is like as a business it's impacting.
Yeah. Go ahead,
I was
Lars.
going to say, Tim, as an owner, what are you seeing or how are contracts being structured with builders around this? You're mentioning risk tolerance, but obviously like you go to market, right? The faster we get that thing in the door, everything starts moving from there. So is it acceleration? Is it multiple shifts a day? Like what's I guess you could say trending to be the norm out there in the field, right?
So the norm is pretty chaotic, to say the least, right now, but it is essentially all hands on board. Yes, you are back to multiple shifts, 6, maybe 7 days a week. And, although there's a schedule with a finish line, I would consider it more of a target, right? Because essentially that date that's been agreed to at the owner, that's kind of the last day that they're willing to accept it. But ideally, they want it earlier.
Last day planner.
Yeah, that's like that's the red line in the sand. That's like drop dead. I have to have it this day, but I really want it 2 months earlier than that. And so then you're back to the collaborative approach of, okay, how can we pull that in, right? How can we pull
Yeah.
it in? Like, we need to pull that in. Yeah, we may have agreed to January 1, but I really need to have it in November,
Yeah.
you
So
know?
what's the biggest constraint that you see around like delivering it early? Is it, I'm assuming, labor or materials, but is it a component of, I remember back in the day, wasn't it like trusses, or lentils, or like Amazon bought up like every truss company and was like supplying, trusses to them. And then, your common little job, your MOB down here, just couldn't get off the ground because they sucked up all the inventory in the country. So from a material standpoint or labor, like what are your constraints that you're experiencing? And
I think
are they like common across each job? Like this seems to be the choke point in every single project. Or are they different?
no, I mean, you are correct. That has changed. I mean, years ago, everybody was always pushing to buy out the steel and the precast.
Yeah.
Like, those had to be the two packages that had to be done first, because if you didn't have the steel or the precast,
Months. Yeah.
all bets were off, right? I think I mean, it's not to say that that still isn't a limited supply chain. It's still limited, but now I think the bigger priority or the bigger issue is field trades, right?
Yeah.
Like, as a market as a whole, the AI and ML is exploding. Every hyperscaler is trying to build as much and as fast as they can. It's super competitive within the labor force, and like, the labor force has not grown at the same speed or capacity, right? And like, you look at an apprenticeship period, it's 4 years, right? So it's not like you're going to get, a licensed certified electrician in a short period of time.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big commitment. It's a 4-year commitment till you
Yeah.
get to that point. So labor force is probably one of the biggest challenges to overcome, as well as the supply chain itself for the equipment. Now, everybody lived through the COVID and post-COVID supply chain issues. I think a lot of the supply chain issues from pre and post-COVID, those have been absolved, and like, you don't have like the material issues, like availability of steel for switchgear or something like that. Those have kind of taken care of themselves, but now it's more of a throughput from the suppliers, right? So if you're looking at Siemens, Eaton, ABB, right? Like, how fast can they produce the equipment that's needed to keep the projects moving forward? And so the assembly lines at a lot of the OFE manufacturers is an issue, and they're
Mhm.
facing the same labor issues as the field trades, right? And so those are the two biggest ones right now: equipment availability, labor force.
Yeah.
So, with those constraints in mind, I remember one of the challenges we had in our time was you kind of had the variety you talked about in terms of releasing certain packages early, but you also had this constant like design change or threat of design change always kind of hovering above your operational delivery. I guess now that you're on the owner side, is that being strategically reviewed of we have to keep some of these variables constant, and or is changing out the cooling design as you're ordering equipment still a reality?
It's still a reality, but the design decisions do tend to get locked. Because you'll get to the point where your general contractor teams are going to say, if you want me to implement this design change, you're pushing the end date, right? And so you're always kind of pushing up against that, right? Like, when is the last ability to cut in a design change? But that is a challenge too, the design change. The server technology for AI and ML services, it almost changes by the day,
Mm.
right? And so a lot of times by the time you finish a building and you deliver it, it's already out of date.
Hmm.
Because the server technology within the 9-10 months that you were building that building has changed, and now that building will be operating an outdated server.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It's like, I can't even wrap my head around like trying to live in that world. It's like,
Yeah.
you're constantly behind. Talk about stress. Tim, I've always thought like sort of specifically around this like challenge, right? Where like it takes time to put stuff in place in the field, right? Like it, and then by that point in time, they've already come up with something fancy or newer. But like, to me, there's like a backbone. Like you can always sort of like take out and put in new. Have you seen any sort of standardization from the engineers and the designers around like, hey, this is a really solid, like, I'm going to use the word structure, but like this whole encompassing like environment so that you can sort of plug and play with new tech, just boom, boom, boom. I've always wondered, like, to me, that's that manufacturing assembly line. And in this case, just rip out the old, put in new super fast. Like you upsize everything. Like you just put more infrastructure in, which might give you more runway. But if you're building however many of these concurrently, now you can have that purchasing power. You get in line and you're just gobbling up capacity. Are you guys taking that approach, or am I way off?
Unfortunately, with how new AI and ML is, standardization,
It just doesn't exist.
it just doesn't exist. Because
Jeez
like I was
Louise.
telling you, with the advancements in the server technology,
Yeah.
standardizing the infrastructure to support it, we're not able to do it because
What are you seeing from an infrastructure standpoint changing in the time that you've been sort of playing in this,
a lot of it revolves around the cooling
Cooling.
for the
Yeah.
facility.
Yeah.
Power is power, right?
Right.
The only thing that changes with the server is how much do you need,
Yeah.
right? And so the power is maybe easier to manage, right? To standardize on, I should say, like, because power can easily change for whatever changes to the rack. But the cooling, different servers require different cooling. They have different heat output, and so that's a real struggle to work through.
Moving target. Yeah, man.
How to standardize the cooling when your server technology is changing.
I think the cooling is going to be a real big market, not just around data, but then also around medical, stem cells, and sort of the housing and the storage of all of this, right? And because it's extreme, these systems are extreme, and they need the capacity to do that stuff.
Hmm.
It's going to be interesting.
So, Tim, if you zoom out a little bit and think about all these variables that a GC has to manage, what separates an average GC from a really good one?
Uh-oh.
Do
I
they have a Tim
think,
Straub leading the
yeah,
field? That's probably one of them.
I would
Duh.
say the more successful GCs are the ones with frontline leaders that know and understand culture and how to build a positive culture on the site.
Mm.
Because obviously, in the environment that we operate in, there's a lot of changes. So, like, as a person, you have to be open to change. You have to have a high level of agility to be able to understand intent and then adapt to the intent as it changes. And so I would say the stronger general contractors are really the ones who embed like a growth mindset within their frontline leaders, and the ones that know how impactful culture can be on a job site, right? The culture, it's not something that you can just easily define, but you'll see it in the productivity from the trades, right?
Huh.
The sites that can build faster, meet these aggressive schedules, are generally the ones where there's a positive culture on site.
I mean, it is fascinating that we speak to a lot of variety of different leaders in the industry, right? Whether it be tech founders, folks like yourself on the owner side, general contractors. And when we talk about success, it often comes back to leadership and some element of culture. And it's in an industry where we spend so much time talking about technical expertise. It is that soft skill that I think often determines the outcome. And yet, I think we don't have a ton of organized training around that category. And I know there's some, but Lars, like you owned a general contracting business. How tactical were you guys around the development of leaders in that capacity?
Figured that was going to be a longer than a space bar unmute response. Appreciate you asking the question. We were pretty purposeful, actually, and I think it was born out of pain experienced by not having things go our way we wanted, and we sort of did a deep dive as to why, right? And there are certain qualities of leaders, that provide an environment that, regardless of the stress, right, regardless of the factors that, like, they're asking us to do the impossible, but someone still picks up the rifle and charges up the hill, right? And I think, to Tim's point, that's the power of, like, a strong superintendent with the support of a company behind them. And, and when I say the support of the company behind them, it's, the servant leaders back in HQ, is calling up the super out in the field and saying, hey, what can I do to make your day easier today? What boulders can I lift for you? What rocks, what difficult phone call needs to occur that I can take off your back? There are so many companies that I don't think take that approach. And I called it the Tyvek suit wearers, right? Where the shit doesn't stick to them. Because construction's messy and it's a team sport, and it has to be, the teams that win are purposeful around player development and coach development and communication and transparency around, this is our game plan and this is how we win. And the player needs to have the ability to raise their hand and say, listen, my ankle might not feel the best and I don't know if I'm the right one for this, or something else might be going on. But being able to have those conversations about risks where all parties, right? The sub, the GC, the owner, the construction manager can just say, we have a common goal, enough fighting, and I think you're right, or, I think you're wrong. Just, how are we going to solve this, guys?
Yeah.
And to Tim's point early on, he has realized, I don't want to say, you use the word leading questions, right? It's like, you have to be able to ask questions. You can't just tell someone that they're wrong, right? You have to be able to have a dialogue around how we can jointly win. And that is such a three-dimensional problem in the industry, where I think we've been trained to just battle each other. We've just been trained to fight. And it's like, there's times to fight because I'm backed into a corner as a GC and I have to fight my way out. Like, that's the only way I'm going to survive. But it's like, how did I end up here? So appreciate the question. I think Tim brings a very unique perspective from a field standpoint. And I loved how you're like, electricians versus iron workers. It's like, dude, two fantastic personas out in the field, right? Like, so different, right? So different. And how you get them both to pick up a rifle and take the hill and high five each other along the way, right?
Man.
Not like friendly fire shoot each other, but like, hey, let's go do this together. This is going to be fun. So
I like that. That's good context from a GC's perspective. And that, I think, we'll have some listeners that I think also have some thoughts. But maybe getting into tech adoption a little bit, Tim, in the categories of quality and commissioning, from the outside looking in, it's hard to see VC money always going to the flashy and the shiny things when, in my opinion, there's categories of our industry that are not as well invested in, or those workflows aren't as well invested in because, a VC in a Patagonia vest doesn't always understand the intricacies of commissioning. And so I guess from your standpoint and viewpoint, have you seen some tooling come into those categories that you're like, man, this is doing it?
Yeah, I think actually, AI, all the capabilities of AI are being learned right? And already you're starting to see AI implemented into the construction process. Now, I think a lot of it's to be determined on where that's going to go. I mean, everybody's trying to leverage AI to some extent, but where can you do it? In specific to commissioning, I think AI has a unique capability to automate a lot of the testing, right? Now, people shouldn't be afraid that that means, oh, it's going to reduce or remove commissioning agents. It's just going to make the commissioning agents more efficient. AI, definitely is a strong tool and has a lot of capabilities, but not able to operate without a human. And the AI
Yeah.
is only as good as the human with it. You can go and chat GPT or anything, and the output all depends on the command prompt from the person who put it in there. So like the human element isn't going away by any means. And I think AI for commissioning, there's a lot of ideas on how we can implement it. A lot of things are being tried as we speak, but
Like with these like general language models, or are there specific like construction oriented LMs that you're finding are kind of on their way to being useful?
there are some products in the market that have come to light. I think a lot of it though is still in development, so it's like not widely available. And depending
Yeah.
on where you're working, you're gonna find different tooling options, right? A lot of the tech companies are trying to build their own tooling to help achieve their own capacity goals.
Stephen, one of the challenges we're having on the software side is just training the models, right? Having that data throughput to train the models and not, what's the word, hallucinate, because it's real. You're like, as a builder, Tim, do you have the patience for something that you're like, I know a human wouldn't have, like what am I doing here? This is stupid. You're
How many
fired.
computers have you broken, Lars?
I'm not quite like a gorilla in the office, but yeah.
Uh,
But
Yeah,
I think that's where the industry has little patience for mistakes
yeah.
like that, because we are not afforded that luxury of the time to make mistakes. And each one
mm,
of those mistakes, it's disruptive. It breaks all the gears moving, and all of a sudden something just sticks, and it's like, hold on, what do we do here? Yeah.
Well, Tim, I've enjoyed this. We've got a few minutes left. I think it would be great to hear a message from you, and we'll say the scenario is like there's a young project engineer working a data center right now. We'll say he's like 20 miles south of Amarillo, Texas. He's not in his preferred location, but he's digging in, and he is curious to hear your perspective on what should he be doing to separate himself maybe within his team, but also help separate that GC to deliver excellence for an owner like you. And you gave us a lot of hints along the way, but do you have a specific
yeah.
message for him?
I think the growth mindset is a differentiating factor. It's
Yeah.
not. I once worked with a project manager on the owner side, and he notoriously always said, "Seek to understand." And I think that was a pretty powerful approach that that project manager had,
Mm.
because too often, particularly as a contractor, you're constantly being squeezed, right? You're fighting through labor issues, personality issues, you're trying to meet a schedule, deliveries are late, like you're constantly, just getting poked from every
Hammered.
angle, right? But having the patience to seek to understand why something is the way it is will actually get you further, and it, like, if you're working through an issue with the electrician, rather than just assuming why, you're looking at something that maybe wasn't what you wanted, you know taking the time to understand why it is where it is, and then working together with them to get it to where it needs to be, right?
Mm.
Don't assume that you know why you're looking at something that wasn't ideal. Ask the questions, seek to understand the situation, and then, also have that growth mindset, be open to alternative methods and strategies. And then, I mean, for that young project engineer fresh out of college, like you said, they're in sweaty Amarillo, not where they want it to be. But if you're patient long term in your career, you're going to be better off, right? Like,
Mm.
you're going to, you know, don't have a short sighted outlook, right?
Yeah.
Think long term, think big picture. Yeah, maybe I don't want to be in Amarillo, but if I stay 2 years here, where could it take me in the future if I perform well?
Yeah. That is good. Lars, your keyboard is so loud.
Oh,
I've
it is.
I've kept muting you, but I've given up. But Tim, those are really good nuggets. And I do think I feel better as a former GC knowing there's a person like you now on the owner side. And I'm sure there are GCs out there interacting with some variety of your work that feel the same. Any final thoughts before we go? You gave us a lot of them. I just keep like stretching out the episode. But any other thoughts you want to get out there, Tim?
Take a deep breath, be patient.
Man,
It's
breathing techniques, that's a big one.
it's a very dynamic environment that
Yeah.
we're operating in. But those that are patient and hang in there, I have an optimistic outlook that your career will go far. You lose your patience, you throw in the towel, you might be building the local McDonald's, which nothing wrong with that. They
No,
need to be
yeah.
built, right? Like everybody still wants their Big Mac, but it's kind of where do you want to be in your career, right? Like to each their own.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair point. Lars, any thoughts or takeaways?
Tim, thanks for the time, man. A lot of good nuggets there. Really appreciate the seek to understand shows.
That's a
That's a
good
lot
one.
of that's a lot of wisdom. And I think if the industry embraces like that sort of leadership approach or mindset, like a lot of good things can happen. A lot of those obstacles, I think, will just melt away. Because again, I believe everyone has the best intentions whenever they step their foot onto a job site, right? Like I'm here to build some pretty cool stuff. Like we are very unique in having that product. So seek to understand is fantastic. No, Stephen, honestly, I think the close was great. I always judge you for your closing questions, but this was good. Apparently, with my loud keyboard, I'm the one to blame this time. No, Tim, fantastic. I was going to ask you, like, should people? Why would someone want to be a superintendent right now, out, graduating from college? Like why would you say go do this? Because it's hard.
'Cause I
It's
think
hard.
the opportunity is theirs to lose. There's an incredible amount of opportunity. I mean, I can speak firsthand that like as a growing through an organization to become a superintendent, right? My career really took off in the data center industry. It's not to say that other industries don't offer those same opportunities, but when you're looking long term at the growth specific to data centers, the opportunities are almost endless
Yeah.
at this point. And we wouldn't be sitting here talking in this platform without data centers, right? And we all have this insatiable appetite for our technology. But I think few recognize the backbone of that technology is these data centers, right? Without
100%.
these data centers, forget your Google Maps, forget text messaging, your FaceTime, Messenger. None of that's going to exist.
Yeah. And then the next episode, we'll talk about the problems associated with that. But for now, I think that is the pod. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate your time, man.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim.
Very well.